Hi, my name is Louis Ortiz with Keller Williams Morristown, and I'm a licensed realtor in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. I am also a notary and a productivity coach. A productivity coach teaches new agents coming into the field how to practice. I also have been doing this for 8 years and I do all ranges, and I've worked with investors, buyers, and sellers. But the purpose of this video is to go over what a seller consultation is and what to expect and how I do my seller consultations. As a seller consultation, there's a two-step. I may use both, a one-step or two-step. One step is basically I go to the property once and I kind of go over everything, versus a two steps. I would go to the property once to kind of see what the property looks like. Then I will do a little bit of research and then schedule another appointment where I will come back for a second time. Again, I typically do a one step unless the property needs it or there is some kind of scenario where a two step is required. With a one step, typically I will have a phone conversation with the seller, and that phone conversation can be anywhere between 10, 20, 30 minutes, maybe even a little bit more. I ask a whole bunch of series of questions. Typically, most of the questions are about the property, like how long have you lived there? What kind of improvements have you done? Is there anything I should know? I also ask some questions about how much is owed on the property, if there's any liens, are there other decision makers, many things like that. Once I get a lot of this information, I then go back and do a desktop study of the property. So basically, I will go onto our local MLS or multiple listing service, and then I will then look at sold properties, and I'm looking at very specific things. I'm looking at time frame, I'm looking at proximity, I'm looking at how closely related this property is to the the subject property that the seller is looking to sell. And so I'm looking at condition, I'm looking at if it's a distressed property versus a not distressed property. So all those things go into the CMA, or comparative market analysis. Once I've completed the CMA, typically I have an appointment date, usually with a seller. Sometimes it's the next day or 2 days after that, or whatever's convenient to the seller. So I'm preparing this whole package, including the CMA, the listing documents. I'm also preparing a seller net sheet. So when I meet, I can go over the whole process in its entirety. Typically, once the consultation starts, it could be anywhere between 30 minutes all the way up to 2 hours, depending if the seller has a lot of questions and, if there's anything that they kind of want to go through in more detail. The day of the consultation, I will bring all these documents with me. I will also usually ask to see the property so I can have a better understanding. This will allow me to also, I have now had a conversation with the seller. So now with the conversation with the seller, I can then put together what the property actually looks like and determine a good price based on all the research that I conducted. So typically I come through, the seller will show me around. We will then sit down at the table. As we walked around, I will give some of my advice on things to do to declutter, and also any small minor improvements. If the seller's looking for major improvements to do, I typically have a conversation depending on the major improvements. I may say, yes, it's worth it, or no, it's not worth it. I look at it through the lens of a buyer, basically. Once we're sitting down, I then pull out all the documents. So a lot of the documents are disclosures that I either have to go over because it's part of my brokerage, or it's a state thing that I have to go over. And it's just a tedious part of the consultation, but a very necessary one. As far as those documents go, the other thing is I go over the CMA. I show the seller a lot of the properties, what to look for, like what price points that they were listed, what price points they sold at, how long were they on the market, the condition of them. So I go in a little bit more detail of what that looks like. If the seller has some other properties that maybe that they saw, I will discuss that. A lot of times I bring my laptop. I typically go over a paper presentation, but I can also do it digitally, but most people like the paper, so I typically do paper. Uh, if there's something specific, I may pull out my laptop. I always bring my laptop to all consultations just in case if I have to do any research right then and there and explain something to the seller. Uh, During the consultation, it's not necessary. A consultation is just that. I'm looking to get a listing and helping that seller um, to move forward if that's something that they wish to do. But I am not there to sell them on that they have to use me. I always recommend that sellers get three opinions and see what that looks like. In addition to I do I do go over, a plan depending on their timeline and when they're ready to sell. Typically, most sellers will meet with me 3 to 6 months out before they even have to sell so that they can get their house ready. It does take a while to declutter a home. There's a lot of, many years. Typically, a person lives there many years and they have to declutter and depersonalize, paint and just it's just a process. So typically most seller will call me 3 to 6 months out so that way we can talk about when's the best time to sell, what kind of strategy works best for them to get the highest price for their home. I then can sometimes help that person with buy-in. Typically, I do. It depends if they're moving out of state or if they're relocating because of a job, then that might be a little bit different. But I can also give recommendations with realtors in other states and even other countries. And that's typically what a consultation should look like. You shouldn't be pressed to sign any documents. I typically will not pressure anyone into signing the documents. I will ask, do you want to move forward? But if the person says no, I say, okay, I will continue following up with you and see until they say, I've already either signed with somebody else or, you know, I'm not thinking of selling this year, so I may just touch base in less frequent amounts. And that's typically how it works. But I'm not looking to pressure you into signing or saying that you have to make it this price. I typically come and hope that you would use my recommendation on price because, of my experience, but it's up to the seller. And I will also go over as to why I chose the price that I did. And that's typically, again, a conversation. Sometimes some sellers need to make a certain amount. And so we'll talk about that. They may need a certain amount of money to move forward, um, and sell. Sometimes it's not just the time. And so that's just typically some of the things about a consultation. So I just wanted to go over that. All right. Thank you. We'll have a great day.